can't save me.
Last Night in Soho comes from Edgar Wright in his first attempt to direct a serious horror film. But how did he do? An inspiring fashion designer is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer. But the glamour is not all it appears to be, and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something darker. I love Edgar Wright's films. I love his trilogy of Shaun the Dead, Hot Fuzz, The World's End. I love Baby Driver. I love Scott Pilgrim. I love all his films. They're the type of films that you can watch at any time during the day, whatever mood you're in, and you're always going to have a blast. And I said in my intro, this is the first time he's doing a serious horror film, which it really is. Shaun the Dead is a horror film, but it's extremely funny. Last Night in Soho is a passion project for Edgar Wright. This is more of a serious horror movie. Even though this is more of a serious and darker tone than what Edgar Wright normally does, you can definitely feel his style throughout this whole entire film. There's a lot of energy throughout this whole entire film. There's a lot of colors. There's a lot of quick cuts. He incorporates music so well in this film, like he does in all his other films. That's the first compliment I gotta give this film, is that Edgar Wright does a great job of sustaining his style into this horror movie, and it still feels fresh. It still feels like a lot of fun. It's very well paced. It really feels like an Edgar Wright horror film. And I know you're gonna be like, no shit, Edgar Wright's directing a horror film. Of course it's gonna be like that. But I just gotta say, the way that his normal style of directing and how normal horror movies or normal thriller movies go, it blended very well here. The performances here are fantastic. Thomasin McKenzie had a difficult task here. She had to bring a lot of energy to each scene, but at the same time, she has to act very timid and fucking terrifying. And she does a great job leading this film. And Anya Taylor-Joy is also fantastic as well. She has to play a different character from Thomasin McKenzie, but she does a great job of bringing a lot of energy, but at the same time, there's deeper meanings behind her character. I thought the first half, or I would say 2/3 of this film, is fantastic. It is a film that has so much mystery that keeps you constantly engaged because of Edgar Wright's style of directing and his writing and everything like that. But there's a real mystery here that is extremely interesting. Another thing this film does great is creating anxiety for the audience. I was on a roller coaster of anxiety watching this film. It's not that it's necessarily scary or anything. I just felt uncomfortable throughout this whole entire film. But they did a great job of keeping you constantly uneasy. Like I said before, the first half or 2/3 of this film is fantastic. And then we get to the last act. And look, this is going to be extremely hard to talk about without spoilers. And I'm not going to talk about spoilers, don't worry. I'm going to keep it very vague. But the last third of this movie really starts to derail the whole entire film. It's like they had this momentum of horror and anxiety and great filmmaking, great performances and everything. And then the last act, they make some decisions that make you question a lot of things that happened throughout the film. And then also, it just comes off as kind of fucking ridiculous. I was just like, what? Really? Oh my god, this is painful to talk about without spoilers. Because there are times, like, halfway through the film, especially towards the end, where I'm like, oh, that doesn't really work, but it's not really that bad. But then we get to the final act, and these things keep happening, and they make these choices, and it just comes off as kind of silly. Which is weird, because throughout this film, I was still on edge and engaged, even though some of these elements did feel out-of-worldly in some way. But there was this direction they were going for, and I really thought they were going to stick on that path, and they decided not to do that. And I think if they stayed on the original path I thought they were intending to do, I think the ending could have been 20 times better and honestly extremely frightening. And I hate criticizing a film because it ends a different way than I thought it was going to end. But I gotta be honest, I think the choices they made for the end of the film don't really work, but they had something there. They were building to something that could have really worked. Last Night in Soho was a perfect blend of horror and Edgar Wright's style of directing. I think this is an impressive debut for serious horror for Edgar Wright. Yes, I know he's made Shaun the Dead, and that's a horror film, but this is the first time we're getting a horror film from Edgar Wright that doesn't really have a comedic tone. And I think overall it was pretty impressive. The biggest compliment I can give this film is the style of directing. It's very colorful. It's very well paced. There's a lot of great shots. There's a lot of quick cuts. It's very Edgar Wright, and it is a perfect blend of horror in Edgar Wright, and I think it really works with that. Performances here are great. Thomasin McKenzie was fantastic. Anya Taylor-Joy was fantastic as well. They give a lot of energy to this film, but at the same time, there are deeper meaning to their characters and some darker meaning to their characters as well. The first 2/3 of this film are great. I was constantly on edge. I was on an anxiety roller coaster ride, and I was always engaged and interested in what was going to happen next. It was a very well-written mystery. But then we get to the third act, and honestly, the whole film kind of derails. Doesn't ruin the whole entire film, but they had all this momentum going for them. I thought they were going to go in one direction. I think would have been really great and honestly somewhat frightening. But they decided to go a different direction. And you're just sort of sitting there like, really? It's really frustrating because it feels like they had something there. It's even more frustrating. I can't talk about spoilers because I keep everything spoiler free. But I'm just saying, I think if they went this different direction, this film could have been a lot better and it would have got a lot higher rating. I'll give Last Night in Soho 7 Davy Daves. I think for sure Edgar Wright should do another horror film. He has a fantastic vision. You can tell this was a passion project. But I'll be honest though, I want to see another quippy, quick cut Edgar Wright movie again. Like Hot Fuzz. Or something like that. But I get he wants to do something different. I totally understand. And I'm all for another horror movie from Edgar Wright. I'm just saying he's a great director. I love his films. I'm glad to see another one of his films. I can't wait to see what he does next. So, Last Night in Soho. Let me know what you guys thought of it. If you've seen it, I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more Dave Dave's Takes.